Hi everyone and welcome to the third episode of 4K on a Budget, the series where we attempt to run challenging games at Ultra HD resolutions on a lowly GTX 970. Why the 970? Well, check this out. It's the Steam hardware survey with 5 months of data running up to May 2017, and guess what? Yup, even with Pascal on the market, the 970 is as popular as ever. Number 3 on the list, GTX 1060, and that's interesting. On many games you can overclock the 970 to match its performance. In short, by targeting a 970 with an OC in place, we can demonstrate 4K gaming performance achievable by around 10.5% of all PC gamers. So in previous episodes we've run the Crysis trilogy at native 4K on this lowly card. We've got fairly decent results out of Batman Arkham Knight, regarded as one of the most poorly optimized games on PC, and we've run the rest of the Arkham series at full fat 4K at 60 frames per second. Hasn't been easy. Tweaking settings for best performance is always required, and on the most demanding games sometimes we need to tweak a bit with custom resolution injections and other kind of hacks, but the struggle, the grappling with the settings, well, in a perverse way, it's part of the fun. For this episode of 4K on a Budget, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to take one of the most phenomenally optimized game engines on the market, a piece of technology that's so smart it has the ability to prioritize frame rate over just about everything else. I mean, who needs to tweak settings when the game engine has the ability to do it by itself on the fly, ensuring that you get the best graphical quality without taking a frame rate hit during gameplay? I refer, of course, to Turn 10's epic Forza Motorsport engine, and I'm going to be aiming to run the brilliant Forza Horizon 3 at Ultra HD resolution with settings equivalent to Xbox One or better at the same 30 frames per second frame rate. And after that we'll target 60 frames per second with Forza Motorsport 6 Apex, Turn 10's cut down version of the Xbox One Classic. So let's begin by overclocking our 970. We don't push things to extremes here, but there's a ton of overclocking headroom on basically every 970 we've ever tested, even the small form factor ones like this excellent Zotac model. Overclocking is actually really easy and nothing to be worried about. We're aiming to increase core frequencies here by 200 MHz compared to reference clocks. We're using an MSI gaming model here, which already has a 64 MHz factory OC. Take that away from our target 200, and so we dial in plus 134 MHz here in MSI Afterburner. Memory plus 500 MHz there takes us up to 8 gigabits per second of bandwidth. Nice. This generally gives us compute performance broadly equivalent to GTX 1060 or GTX 980. And so we begin. Forza Horizon 3, well, let's dip into the settings. I mean, the safe solution here is to target high settings with dynamic optimization in play and a 30 frames per second cap, and this basically puts us on par with Xbox One, just with 4 times the resolution. I recommend dialing back the pre-rendered frames there to 1, as it will decrease your input lag significantly. It's solid. I mean, I could play this all day. I think what really impresses me here is that this game is piling on image quality like you would not believe. Not only are we operating at 4K resolution, we have FXAA anti-aliasing and 4X multi-sampling on top of that, and we're still holding our target frame rate. Forza Horizon 3 had a pretty meaty optimization push recently, big gains on CPU, and it seems that multi-sampling isn't the complete performance killer that it was at launch. But you know what? When I turn off the 30 frames per second cap, I'm spending much of my time at 35 to say 38 frames per second. To me, that says that maybe I have some overhead to play with, and I did wonder, could we do better? I mean, one thing I really wanted here is ultra level motion blur. It mitigates the 30 FPS frame rate a touch and just looks so much cooler in cutscenes. So, can we improve on the visual features here? The short answer is kind of, but not really. So here's the thing. You can run at 4K 30 at ultra settings with dynamic optimization in play, but the problem is that you get fairly frequent lurching stutter, definitely in cutscenes, and a bit too often for my liking during gameplay. My gut feeling here is that we may be overcommitting the GTX 970's memory and pushing too hard on settings like reflection and car detail. But here's the thing, tweaking individual settings up or down kills the dynamic optimization feature completely. and this is a bit annoying. So I went through several flavors of settings here, dialing back shadows, reflections and car LODs, and top-end environment textures. The end result, I still got stutter. I thought I'd worked out a pretty decent balance of ultra and high settings, but something that appeared to be locked at 30 frames per second, so I wiped my save game and restarted Forza Horizon 3 from scratch. The initial dash to the festival site is actually a very strong workout for the hardware, giving you a variety of locations through the open world, including the taxing rainforest area, plus a big bunch of cars on screen simultaneously to provide a real stress test. And you know what? It's perfectly playable, but the fluidity overall isn't on par with Xbox One. So yeah, maybe I had to have a rethink here. Maybe ultra level motion blur is just too much for the 970 to handle, but perhaps more likely is the fact that Turn 10 and Playground Games' dynamic optimization feature just works too well. Bottom line is that I feel a consistent level of performance isn't just essential for a racing game, it's a key part of the developer's vision here. Put simply, if they've gone to the bother of creating a dynamic load balancing system designed for optimal performance, it almost seems like I'm letting down Turn 10 and Playground by not using it. So yeah, high settings with dynamic optimization on. It's the way forward here, and it is simply beautiful. The only noticeable stutter remaining comes from super detailed close-ups that only occur in engine-driven cutscenes. It's a bit unfortunate, but I can live with it as long as my gameplay is locked. And kind of related to that actually, one thing I really need to give the developers credit for is that the 30 frames per second option actually works properly, not something that usually happens in PC gaming. By working properly, I mean proper frame pacing. On a standard 60Hz display, each frame persists for 2 refreshes, 33 milliseconds per frame basically. It's the whole reason why developers target 30 FPS on console games to begin with, rather than 40, 45 or whatever. 30 divides evenly into 60 and offers consistency. Clearly, given the choice, full fat 60 is the preferable option, but that's more 1080p territory with a 970 here. Okay then, Forza Horizon 3 at 4K 30 frames per second on dynamic high settings. I actually think performance here may be slightly more stable during gameplay than the Xbox One version. Certainly based on my memories of playing it during the launch period, but maybe Playground has optimized that build too. Regardless though, I'm happy. I mean, I put the game through the ringer as much as I could. I went through the opening dash to the festival site, played through many more events, and that 30 frames per second frame rate was very, very consistent. I think what I like about this one most is that I've not had to unduly compromise quality settings here. One thing I've learned from 4K on a budget is that sometimes cuts are required to get the experience playable as I'd like it, but with Forza Horizon 3, any cuts to image quality are being made on the fly, persisting only as long as they are required. Resolution is the constant, and the image quality here is off the charts. Seriously, try it. Now, let's go back a little further and check out Forza Motorsport 6 Apex, Turn 10's cut down, free-to-play version of Forza 6. Okay, so yeah, it's a bit light on content, but if you're not buying into this whole 4K on a budget thing, well, here you have the chance to check out an awesome example of how it can work beautifully without having to lay out a single penny. Okay, so I'm not going to dwell too much on this one because exactly the same quality preset setup that we used in Forza Horizon 3 gets the job done here for full 4K gameplay at 60 frames per second. That's right, hitting the high quality preset with dynamic optimization in play basically locks you to full frame rate, full resolution gameplay. The only caveat here is that similar to the Xbox One version, introductory engine driven cutscenes operate at 30 frames per second, but man, they still look awesome on the GTX 970 here. Now, one difference up against Horizon is that you can actually specify which quality presets are dynamic and which are not. So yeah, in this case you can spec up other aspects of the presentation, but I found that having these fixed loads in place can cause issues with the dynamic settings scaler, and to be frank, I wouldn't want to compromise the buttery smooth, silky 60 frames per second gameplay here. Also, I really don't recommend unlock frame rate. I got lurches and stutters here when used with the dynamic settings. Keeping everything locked on dynamic aims to get you to 60 frames per second and to keep you there. Of course, it's all about those stress points, and a pretty strenuous workout for Apex concerns courses like Brands Hatch or the Nürburgring with wet weather conditions engaged. If you're running with fixed settings, this can cause real issues, but Dynamic still manages to keep the frame rate at 60 frames per second at all times. I mean, this really is a beautiful experience here. Turn 10 prides itself on its super sharp presentation and high level image quality, and the fact that we get a great experience at Ultra HD resolution on a mere GTX 970 can only be a good thing. Just like Forza Horizon 3, not only are we getting a native 4K presentation, we're also running with multi-sampling here, an anti-aliasing technique that usually cripples performance, especially at 4K resolutions. Okay, so what's the takeaway here? Well, this is one of the leanest, most optimal game engines in the business right now, initially built to extract the best performance possible from a console with fairly meager processing power. In bringing that technology to PC, Turn 10 and Playground Games have scaled up further in terms of fidelity, but the core features that made these games run so well on Xbox One work equally well on PC. And that's the key here to a GTX 970 running these two games so well, all of which makes me wonder. Key to Forza's outstanding performance are optimization and per-frame budgeting. The circuits, the cars, the effects, everything has to run within an exceptionally tight time window. When I visited Turn 10, they'd optimized this engine still further to allow for dynamic weather systems and lighting in Forza Motorsport 7. So I've got to wonder, will the next Forza run at 4K 60 on a GTX 970? Well, let's put it this way, I'm not holding out too much hope, and there's clearly no room for those 4K textures, but maybe an RX 480, 580, or even an R9 390 could possibly pull it off. And yes, I will be all over that when the PC version appears. But for now, I really hope you enjoyed this episode of 4K on a budget. I certainly had tons of fun putting it together. Do let me know if you have any suggestions for games you'd like to see in this series, or maybe you're running your own awesome 4K experience on a mainstream card. But anyway, for now, do like and subscribe and follow us on Twitter. And yes, please do consider supporting the Digital Foundry Patreon, where all of our videos, including this one, are available in pristine format for downloading and viewing on your computer or 4K TV. But for now, that's all from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.